The other thing that sort of on this whole fasting versus TRE topic that gets asked a lot that I have to ask you has to do with coffee, actually specifically caffeine, like black coffee, so without any cream or any calories or anything like that. So caffeine can start things like clocks in your liver.
Yeah, it resets the clock. Means the clock is always running, it just resets
it. Okay. So a lot of people in the intermittent fasting community, they do a lot of fasting where they're fasting for 16, 24 hours, 48 hours, but they drink caffeine and they notice that they lose weight. And so they say, well, I'm still getting results.
Yeah.
So it's fine. I can drink my black coffee. And, obviously someone that's fasting for 48 hours, it's very different than doing a TRE schedule where you're eating for 10 hours a day or 11 hours a day and then fasting for 13 or 14 hours every night, right?
Yeah.
So like for a person, for example, that wakes up in the morning, drinks black coffee at 7 a.m. They wake up, have some black coffee at 7 a.m., but they don't eat anything. They don't eat their first bite of food until
10 or 11.
Something.
Yeah.
Then when do they have to stop eating by? Like, is it when the coffee started or is it when they ate the food?
Yeah, so this is a question we also get through the app a lot. And we actually posted a blog on our website. So here is a very different thing. So since we look at circadian rhythm as a whole, it has a sleep component, food component, exercise or activity component. And we know that caffeine resets the body clock. So for example, drinking a cup of coffee is similar to having exposure to bright light for an hour or hour and a half. So that's just on the circadian clock itself. Now the question is, well, will it reset that clock the same way if the coffee comes in the morning versus evening or night? And we know that there is a term called phase response curve. So that means the same light, it relates to light. The same light will reset the clock differently at different time of the day. During daytime, when your system is expecting light, if you're in the dark room and we see light, it doesn't reset our clock. But in nighttime, it will reset our clock. So we don't know what is the phase response curve for coffee. Whether it resets much more at certain time and less at other time, the direct impact of coffee on clock is unknown. And the second thing that relates to coffee is sleep, because coffee definitely suppresses sleep in a lot of people. Some people may be resistant. And the reason why we drink coffee is we wake up, we get up from the bed, but we may be still feeling sleepy. We want to get that extra energy. That's why we drink coffee. And along that line, of course, drinking coffee at night is a straight no-no for because it will have impact on sleep. But in the morning, we ask the other question: are you drinking coffee because you did not rest well? You did not rest enough, so maybe that's why you need coffee to reset your mental clock or brain clock to start it. And sometimes it can be just a pure habit or addiction. For example, absolutely. I used to like coffee in the morning, and then I realized, well, let's get rid of coffee. What happens? Maybe for first 2 or 3 days I got a headache, and then now I'm used to drinking just hot water. It's just the feeling of sipping something from a sippy cup. It's almost like a baby sipping something from sippy cup. And I realized that that's what I was addicted to. I can actually substitute coffee with hot water and nothing changed. I still felt energetic after my hot water. I realized that was my addiction.
After you got over the...
After I got over the first 2 days of headache, withdrawal symptom. And then the third is the question of metabolism. When we drink coffee, is it going to trigger metabolism or certain things in our gut? So that the gut will think, well, now I have to start working. The rest is over. And we think that's where the metabolism or the function of the gut to absorb or digest this coffee, send that caffeine to liver and then to brain does kickstart right after we drink coffee, because that's how we are feeling the effect of coffee in the rest of our body, because the stomach started working, it absorbed coffee, it sent it to liver might have metabolized it slightly and started to send it to the rest of the brain and body, and then it gets back to kidney, gets metabolized and excreted. So then the question is, forget about circadian clock. Now if we think about just metabolism and say mitochondria function, or even say go back to autophagy, and then ask, is caffeine breaking the fasting so that it stops autophagy, or it stops something else? Is there a crosstalk between, say, caffeine receptor and glucagon receptor, so that it tells, no, fasting is kind of slightly over. You may not be in 100% fast, you're in 40% or 50% fast. So that's where things become murky. So that's why we say, well, if you can drink your coffee within this 8 hour, 10 hour, it's better. But at the same time, we know, going back to the study that we discussed, Ruth Patterson's study, they did not consider coffee as food. So when they considered 13 hours overnight fasting, that 13 hours actually included coffee and tea. So in that way, for cancer, reducing breast cancer risk, this 13 hours of fasting can include coffee, black coffee and tea. So this is where things are really murky, and we tend to err on the safe side. So we tell, well, if you can have that coffee within your eating window, that's much better. If you can't, then just have black coffee. At least that will not trigger your insulin response or glucose response. So that's what we do. Great. We recommend.
Just sort of as a side note, because you mentioned it, I recently spoke with Dr. Guido Cromer, who's an expert on autophagy, and he was telling me about a study he had published a few years ago where the specific polyphenols in coffee, decaf or caffeine, so irrespective of caffeine, it was the polyphenols, they triggered protein deacetylation, which is one of the triggers for autophagy. So it actually increased autophagy.
So that's why we never know, because there's coffee or any natural compound has so many different ingredients that we don't know their activity. And many of them can have very different effect. Means when you think of food, we are mostly in the nutrition science, or most of the scientists are latched onto the effect of protein, carbohydrate and fat. We discount a lot of xenobiotics, and actually our food is, majority of it is xenobiotic, and we have no idea what do they do, either alone or in combination.
And that's another question. I printed out some, but that is a question that's frequently asked by people in the audience, is like things that are xenobiotic, like herbal tea, even, I guess, to some degree, people are asking about flavored water. So water that would contain, for example, like stevia or something, does that start the clock? And I think you've kind of answered that a little bit.
So in that way, means it may not start the clock. And also for your insulin response, it's not actually triggering the pancreas to secrete extra insulin. Insulin is a anabolic hormone, so it's not actually putting our body into a strong anabolic drive. So in that way, in many ways, it's okay to have this non-calorie containing food. But then it gets murkier once we go to, say, Diet Coke or something else, where there is artificial sweetener, and then we know that the artificial sweetener have an impact on gut microbiome, and that's where things become murky. And these are very practical questions, but at the same time, we don't foresee that even there will be any controlled clinical trial to assess the effect of these nutraceuticals, or even things that we take for granted on a daily basis. So this is where, again, the N of 1 experiments, self-experimentation on yourself, trying different kind of behavioral intervention where you switch from water to flavored water, and does it make you feel different? I mean, it's not only weight gain. One has to assess sleep, activity, feeling alert, feeling productive.
Maybe
and this
measuring your fasting blood glucose levels.
blood
People
glucose
do that,
level,
you know.
if you have a fasting, if you have a continuous glucose monitoring
Right.
system.
Even better.
And so this is where strongly this self-experimentation by informed citizens who are very careful, they're not really they don't have any adverse metabolic disease. And again, I'm not promoting that one should start doing self-experimentation,
People are
but
doing
at least,
it.
but at least whatever they're saying, they should share, because
Yeah,
these are
maybe
the things
they should share it with My Circadian Clock.
Yeah.
You guys have.
So even if they put some notes in the feedback section, then we'll compile all of those, and then that will help us to take informed decision
Yeah.
about animal experiments. At least we can go back to animals and say, at least in animals we have tested this. This is how it works.
Right.
And in future, maybe that will trigger some.
Or maybe you'll get 10 people that come back and say, oh, I started drinking my, Diet Coke out in my fasting window, and all of a sudden my blood glucose levels started to get worse.
Yeah.
And so you'll have multiple people telling
Yeah.
you this. Well, maybe there's something to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But people are asking about things like even supplements, and I think again, you've answered that. We don't, are you taking fish oil? Is it a fatty acid? I mean, maybe
Yeah.
there's lots of things here, because that is, if you're taking a fish oil supplement, then
Yeah.
what do you think that's different than taking, for example, vitamin D or?
Well, it's the question of I like this kind of I like to compare this to, say, physical activity. Somebody is completely sedentary. For that person, going for a walk, whether it's in the morning or evening or midnight, doesn't matter, because this person is getting some benefit of physical activity. Similarly, if somebody is very low on vitamin D or needs that fish oil supplement, then what time the person takes doesn't matter, because that deficiency is getting corrected.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's true. But then if someone now dials it slightly higher and says, well, I want to have this protein drink that's 25 grams of protein after my exercise late at night, is it okay? Then that's where I will say, well, then that's going to
Probably not.
affect your gluconeogenesis and muscle recovery. And maybe if you have done a very strenuous exercise, if you're training for like Ironman or something like that, yes, you